For the last 9 months, I've been building a framework in business publicly. I've been through so many changes with branding, my messaging, my audience, everything. And you've watched me go through it. But something I didn't realize was how my identity was changing through all of this. When I started this journey, I started addressing all women who could relate because I thought it was the right thing to do. And I didn't want to exclude anyone, not realizing that the one person I was excluding was myself, my story, my lived experience as a Black woman. I suppressed myself at the expense of others and their comfort. And what's harder than just learning this truth was realizing that I've been doing this for the last 17 years. Welcome to Too Much for the Room. Now let's get into this week's episode. Hi, I'm Shay, capacity strategist and researcher and creator of ESSENTFLOW. And you're listening to ESSENTFLOW by Shay, Too Much for the Room. This is the podcast for high-capacity Black women who think deeper, build differently, and have spent too long shrinking to fit spaces that were never designed to hold them. You were never too much. The room was just too small to hold you. But you found your room. Welcome in. Today I want to tell you about what I discovered, what the research showed me, and why everything I've been building is finally starting to make sense. Let's get into it. Now let me tell you what had happened, okay? No, literally. I was doing research, looking into burnout statistics, trying to understand the patterns I'd been documenting for the last 17 years. And I came across a vulnerability study by Dr. Carey Yazeed. Now, something in her study made me stop. It wasn't just the data. It was the specificity. The way she was naming patterns I recognized. Patterns I'd been living, patterns I'd been documenting without even realizing there was already research on it. So what did I do? I kept digging. And then I found Dr. Cheryl Woods-Giscombé and her work on the Superwoman schema. And then I found Dr. Thema Bryant, Dr. Daphna Oyserman, Dr. Joy Harden Bradford. Black women, researchers, thought leaders, doing work that sounded like what I'd been documenting and experiencing for 17 years. And in that moment, I realized I'm not alone in this. There's literally a whole lineage, history of Black women who have been naming these patterns, studying them, teaching from them. I had no idea they existed because I'd been avoiding looking for them. Not consciously anyway. But I'd been keeping my work broad, generic, including high-capacity people, depth-oriented individuals, meaning makers, literally not leaving anyone out, language that could apply to anyone and everyone. And while I was doing that, I was missing the through line that's been there the whole time. I'm a Black woman. I've been documenting my experience as a Black woman. the patterns I've been seeing are patterns that show up specifically for high-capacity Black women. And I've been too scared to say that out loud. Now let me tell you why I was scared. Because this wasn't about strategy. This was something much deeper. And if you're a Black woman, you know exactly what I'm about to say. Because you've lived it too. You see, we learned early on that being too Black is a liability. That if you want to succeed, we need to make ourselves more palatable, more universal, more acceptable. We learn to adjust our voice, our tone, our presence. We learn to perform a version of ourselves that feels safer in professional spaces. The research calls it code switching. And it's real, y'all. I read a stat last week that said 61% of Black employees report compromising their authenticity to fit into dominant workplace standards. And 34% of us actively code switch at work. But here's the thing the research doesn't always capture. Code switching doesn't stay at work. It follows you home, into your relationships, into your creative work, into the voice in your own head. And I brought it into ESSENTFLOW. Not on purpose. But when I started building publicly, I was afraid that if I made this work too specific to Black women, I would lose people. I would be too narrow. I would limit my reach. So I kept it broad, generic. I kept it universal. And I told myself that was strategic. I was just doing what I've always done. Making myself more palatable. Translating my experience into language that everyone could relate to. Even though the experience I was documenting, the patterns, the exhaustion, the specific kind of burnout that comes from sustained performance across every domain of your life. See, that experience is not universal. It's specific and it's cultural. And I was scared to say that. So let me tell you what I found when I finally allowed myself to look. I found the Superwoman schema. It's a framework developed by Dr. Cheryl Woods-Giscombé, a Black researcher at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. The Superwoman schema describes 5 core beliefs that many Black women carry. 1. The expectation to show strength at all times. 2. Suppression of emotions. 3. Resistance to being vulnerable or depending on others. 4. Determination to succeed despite limited resources. And 5. Helping others even at your own expense. And when I read that list, I saw myself completely, entirely. The overperformance, the over-explaining, the belief that I had to be twice as good to be seen as half as competent. The refusal to ask for help. The driving myself into exhaustion to prove that I belonged. That wasn't just high capacity. That was something more specific. And then I read this quote from Dr. Woods Woods-Giscombé. She said, "These beliefs have helped us survive. But survival is not the same as thriving." And I sat with that. Because she's right. Everything I learned about performing, about being excellent, about never showing weakness, all of it helped me survive. It got me through spaces that weren't always welcoming. It helped me succeed. But it's not the same as thriving. And ESSENTFLOW isn't about survival strategies. It's about reclamation. It's about figuring out who you are when you're not performing anymore. But see, I couldn't teach that clearly while I was still performing in my own work. And then I kept reading. I found research on identity incongruence, on the exhaustion that comes from living in sustained misalignment between who you are and who you perform to be. Not for a day, not for a project, but chronically across every single domain: work, relationships, family, faith, creative expression. And I realized that's exactly what I've been documenting for the last 17 years. The specific experience of being a high-capacity Black woman who learned early on that her natural self needed to be managed, who installed a performed version of herself to succeed, and who is now trying to figure out how to come back home to herself. That's the work I've been doing. That's who I'm actually speaking to. And again, I've been scared to say it clearly. So here's what I'm realizing now. ESSENTFLOW has always been for high-capacity Black women. The patterns I've been documenting: superwoman expectations, sustained performance, code switching, exhaustion, multi-domain identity incongruence. These aren't generic patterns. They're cultural. And when I talk about essence, the first phase of ESSENTFLOW, where you reconnect with who you are underneath the performance, I'm talking about something very specific. I'm talking about discerning your native self from your installed self. Your native self is who you were before you learned that you needed to adjust yourself to be acceptable, before you learned to code switch, before you installed a version of yourself that felt safer. Your installed self is the performed version of you, the one that knows how to navigate professional spaces, the one that adjusts automatically, the one that over-delivers to prove she belongs. In essence, is where you do the work of discernment, of figuring out which parts are still yours and which parts you took on for survival. That's not generic. That's very specific. That's what happens when you've spent your entire life performing and you're finally trying to come home to yourself. And when I talk about foundation, phase 2 of ESSENTFLOW, you're building something that is fully yours. And you're building something in a way that doesn't require you to perform in order to succeed. Building platform independent. Building on channels you own. Building something that honors who you actually are instead of who you learned to be. That's sovereignty. That's reclamation. And it makes much more sense now that I'm saying it clearly. So what does this mean for ESSENTFLOW going forward? It means I'm going to be more specific, not less. It means when I talk about code switching, superwoman expectations, sustained performance across multiple domains, I'm going to name that these are patterns that show up specifically for Black women. Not because other people don't experience burnout or identity struggles, but because the specific combination of patterns I'm documenting, that's cultural. In my experience as a Black woman, that's not a limitation. That's my credential. Because I'm not observing this from the outside. I've lived it. I've documented it for 17 years. My experience is the data. That's what makes this work real. And if it means you're a Black woman who's been listening to this podcast feeling like something was almost there but not quite, this is what was missing. The specificity, the cultural grounding, the permission to stop translating our experience into language that everyone else can digest. I'm going to speak more directly to us now. And if you're not a Black woman, but this work still resonates with you, I'm grateful. I'm grateful. Genuinely. And I'm truly glad you're here. But please know that I'm not going to make this work broader or more generic or more palatable to make sure that everyone feels included. I'm speaking to Black women. I'm speaking directly from my experience in a language we understand. And that clarity, that's what's been missing. So here's the invitation. If you're a Black woman who's been building after bedtime with limited time, limited budget, trying to figure out how to build something real without performing someone else, this is for you. If you're navigating superwoman expectations, code switching exhaustion, and the specific kind of burnout that comes from sustained performance across every domain of your life, this is for you. If you've been told you're too much your whole life and you're finally ready to stop believing it, this is for you. You found your room, sis. And I'm going to stop making this broader than it actually is. ESSENTFLOW is for us. It's built from our experience. It honors our capacity instead of exploiting it. And if you've been waiting for someone to do this work without translating themselves, this is it. You were never too much. The room was just too small to hold you. And now, we're building a bigger one. This is ESSENTFLOW by Shay. Too much for the room. And from here on out, I'm speaking directly to high-capacity Black women. From a high-capacity Black woman through lived experience. And if that's you, I will see you here every other Tuesday at 6 p.m. Thank you for being here. You can find everything ESSENTFLOW at ESSENTFLOWbyshay.com. The blog, the digital products, and when it's ready, the experience. The newsletter is Too Much for the Room, and the link is in the show notes. New episodes of ESSENTFLOW by Shay Too Much for the Room drop every other Tuesday at 6 p.m. See you in the next episode.